It's a relatively small country, France. It's the size of Texas. And yet there are so many varieties of cheese, of breads, of dishes that are oftentimes made with the same ingredients and turn out entirely differently. A lot of them expect to live a cliché. One of them is sitting on a terrace of a cafe drinking a glass of wine. What is French is more about the work-life balance. You know, I'm obviously ambitious in what I do, but I also want to make sure that I save time for also leisure and pleasure.
We are the most visited country in the world.
Welcome to À la Française, the podcast that shines a light on the French art of living and those who shape it.
Hi, everyone. Today, I'm joined by Margaret Johnston-Clarke. Margaret was raised in New York. She's a Yale University graduate. She married a French man and has since made her home in the heart of Paris. Margaret is now one of the senior leaders at L'Oréal at the headquarters of Paris after an impressive career with some of the France's most iconic brands. Today, she's going to share with us how this dual identity, French and American, has shaped her perspective and leadership. Okay, let's go.
Bonjour, Margaret.
Bonjour.
We are very proud to host you on this podcast today. You are going to share your experience or your background about the French culture and the French way of living. I'm not going to introduce your background. I think we prefer to hear you tell us about your childhood and your dual culture.
So thank you very much. So yes, I did move to Paris when I was 7 with my parents and my sister Elizabeth. I was born and brought up in New York City. My mother was French from Nice, and my father was American from Lexington, Kentucky. And we moved to France for a few years, and we ended up never leaving. So my parents both have passed away, but ended up doing the rest of their life in Paris. And we moved when I was 7 and Elizabeth was 4.
So do you have any souvenir from then when you first settled in France, in Paris, I guess? What is coming to your mind when you discovered France?
When we moved to Paris, I remember clearly 2 things. We lived in a hotel for several months, I guess the time for my parents to find an apartment. And I had as a reference Eloise at the Plaza, which is a children's book, which I'd read my whole childhood. And it's about this little girl who lives at the Plaza in New York. And so this was quite different because I was living with my sisters, my parents, and my cat. But we did live at the hotel for quite some time on the Rue de Rivoli. And then the second, I guess, biggest memory for me at the time was the fact that we could walk alone with my sister in the street. And I remember clearly when we finally moved into an apartment, which was also a transition. We stayed in this apartment for a few months in the Rue du Bac in the 7th. My parents asked me to go and get bread at the bakery. And that was like, I had never done anything alone in terms of walking, by myself in the streets of New York.
And I guess you were speaking fluent French when you came in.
So I spoke French. We spoke French because my mother being French, we definitely spoke French at home, but it was a very proper French. I was quite challenged at school because I didn't speak any slang. So that was a challenge to be able to keep up and to understand and to speak with slang and also to get more of the cultural references, notably on certain TV shows.
So New York versus Paris. You spoke about, the first times you went to the bakery to get a baguette. Is there any souvenirs that marked you and marks the difference between New York and Paris in terms of buildings, architecture, people, shops, anything that marked a little girl that you were at 7?
I think safety was a big thing. I left New York City in 1977, so you would never go to the park alone. You would never to Central Park. You would always go with someone. You would never go at night, obviously, when sundown. Those types of topics were never discussed here. I remember as a child. We had a great freedom. And then growing up as a teenager, walking around throughout the night, coming home from parties and stuff, that was probably one of the biggest differences. I think they're definitely two very, very different cities, and I was lucky enough to go back to New York on a regular basis with my family. So I have very special ties to the city. The city of New York has changed way more than the city of Paris in these last...
So you went back to the U.S. for your studies, right? To the university. And at that stage, I believe that you had the choice between staying in the U.S. or going back to France.
Yeah.
What made the decision coming back to France and starting your professional life in Paris?
After my baccalaureate, I took a gap year, which was quite unusual at the time in France, and I worked in Paris in different little jobs. So I decided to study at university in the U.S. And after 4 years after graduating, I was very keen on coming back to my family, to my parents, to my friends, and I was in love with an American painter, and I wanted to show him what it was like to live in Paris.
That's a good reason.
Yeah.
So which part of your personality remains American on your perspective, and what part is more French?
I believe maybe, or what is perceived as American in the way when I work is to be quite direct and concise. What is French is maybe more about the work-life balance, maybe, making sure that in terms of personality, I'm obviously ambitious in what I do, whether it's with my family or with my work, but I also want to make sure that I save time and I keep time for also leisure and pleasure and doing things that are not immediately linked to an objective or to work or something.
Maybe California has that balance that you're describing more than the East Coast, maybe.
Yes, but it also depends where in California. It's so big. I don't know. I think on the general basis, our society in France enables everyone who has a full-time job to have, 5 weeks of paid holiday. So there's certain things that are meant. Lunchtime is a real break. You have probably an hour to take a break and eat lunch alone with friends or whoever. These are things that are not at all embedded throughout the United States, unfortunately, today, unless you're, working from home. And probably even that's impossible. About
lunch, we also have to say that because a lot of Americans believe that we spend 3 hours for lunch with a three-course lunch. We don't do that on a regular basis.
No, we don't. No, definitely we don't. And we stop work much later than in the U.S. because we have dinner later. So, people in Paris usually work in an office till 7 when Americans might leave at 5 or 6. But also we don't eat that early. We eat more closely to like 8 p.m. or something.
So we start to understand what is the American side of your personality and the French side of your personality. On a wider perspective, what would define the French character in general, the French profile?
I think there's something about being impatient, about being quick, about being also conscious of one's history and of being part of a bigger picture, being a collective. Whereas I think in the U.S. there's still something very much about making it as as a person, the success that is expected. So I'm not entirely sure if that's as easy as that, but I would say the French tend to be more about, being part of an older country with older traditions. You might reject them. You might embrace them. In the U.S., a lot of people move away from their home to another part of the country where they start fresh. They go to university at another part of the country. Not everyone, obviously, but some do. And that is kind of part of a quest and a journey. So it's different in that way, yes.
So we spoke about the cliche of the French lunch. Do you have in mind any other cliche that might appear false?
It's a tough one. I think a lot of Americans think French people are rude and arrogant. I think that is incorrect. But I have to say, sometimes it unfortunately is the right cliche. So I want it to be false, but it's not always the case.
Maybe it's the case everywhere.
And it's probably the case in every big city.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And is there another cliche which appears to be true about the French people?
A cliche that I would say is true is family traditions to a certain extent. Sunday lunch, not everyone goes home and eats with their parents, but there is something about keeping a tie with one's immediate family, getting together with one's cousins over, the holidays. There are moments, whether they're religious events or just birthdays or other opportunities, there's a strong sense of family, which I think is very true. And, comes across in a lot of French movies, but I think it's still very true as a cliche.
Yeah, about traditions, yeah.
Yeah.
Since you came back when you were an adult, what links you to the French culture and the French art de vivre? Any souvenirs that you have in mind that definitely links you to France and to the French culture?
I came back with my boyfriend then, who's now my husband. It was fun to make him discover France. He had never been to France through his eyes. So his first job was in a print shop of lithography in Montparnasse. And they only spoke French. They didn't speak English. And they taught him everything in terms of the history of the print shop, the commitments during World War II, how they had been involved with the French resistance and so on. So coming back to France at that stage with Dan was wonderful because I rediscovered certain things that I'd also heard from my parents and my mother, whose father was also in the resistance. My French grandfather, who was what we called in the underground, which was, people who were against, who stood up when the Nazi government, or I should say Germany, invaded France. And so there was really during World War II this kind of underground organization that really took many risks to keep France as free as possible. And so that there was a lot of there was a whole kind of underworld, notably people producing fake IDs and whatnot. So the print shop where Dan worked in Montparnasse, Mourlot, was worked with the most amazing artists, from Picasso to amazing artists. But they also have this underground opportunity to really contribute to saving people's lives and making sure that they would kept safe and not sent to camps.
Yeah, it would be nice to interview your husband and ask him what is same question. What would be his best souvenir and link to France when he came here, not having living in France before? Do you have an idea of what he would answer?
Yeah. I think first of all, he's an artist. So the first thing was he went to art school in the U.S. and most everyone he went to school with ended up going into something much more commercial. So the first thing that he really was amazed by was the fact that being an artist was a full respected job. So he never had to justify his choice. He even got Social Security if he were to hurt himself or needed to go to see the doctor. So it was a full-on profession, and he contributes and, is part of the Maison des Artistes, but he was able to really... So I think the fact that a job this was in 1993, as a painter and a sculptor and a printer was a recognized and well-established job was, I guess, his first big surprise, yes.
So at that stage, to wrap up what we said earlier, what would be your definition of the art de vivre à la française, the French art de vivre?
So I think it's the French art de vivre for me is about. I think there's something Epicurean about it. Like it's focused on pleasure. It's also a form of refinement, but also something that's very simple. We often think of very sophisticated meals or dishes, or when we think of French food. The truth is, it's not. It's actually quite simple. Now, you may have beautiful and exquisite and complicated pastries that require a lot of, but the real art de vivre is about hosting. It's about creating a moment. And meals growing up with my French relatives, less so now, but could take hours. And I remember as a child sitting and just the meal would go on and on and on. But there was so much going on because you would eat, but you would also play, you would also talk, you would also sing, you would also dance, you would also come back. So it was a moment that was kind of out of time. And so that art de vivre, I think, is very that's how I visualize it.
Let's move to your professional life. Mm-hmm. And before we speak about your current job, can you tell us a little bit about your first job when you joined a nonprofit organization? What was it?
So I joined an organization that is still around. That's called the Fondation Agir contre l'exclusion. It's a French NGO based in Paris that had the. It was quite unique at the time because it was bringing together private businesses, public institutions, NGOs, and city halls throughout the country. And the idea was to bring all of these different people together to be able to find work opportunities for some people throughout the country who were not getting easy access to those jobs because of the neighborhoods they lived in, because their parents had been unemployed for some time and they didn't have the access to these type of jobs, or simply because of their skin tone, or because they were being, unfortunately, not passing through the interview systems because of their background.
So agir contre l'exclusion means act against exclusion.
Exactly.
Yes. So you're still involved?
So I did that for 7 years, and then I decided to see how it was on the business side. So I moved and I left organizations, and I went and worked for L'Oréal Group, which is the beauty leader. It's a French company that has today more than 37 international beauty brands.
I think everybody has heard about L'Oréal.
Well,
everywhere in the world.
But most people don't know which brands are in the portfolio. Yeah. But you're absolutely right.
Interesting. So you worked for a champagne house, right?
So I did L'Oréal for 7 years, and then I left and I took a break and went and worked for a champagne house.
Which one?
Moët Chandon for 5 years, and that was a wonderful experience as well. And then I decided to go back into the beauty sphere, and I've been for the past 13 years back at L'Oréal.
Because they called you back.
Yes, they did, but also it was a different type of work environment. But the purpose of both companies and what they were producing made a lot of sense to me. Whether it was receiving and hosting, but also champagne is something you share truly only in happy moments. It's quite rare to go to a funeral and have champagne, or be sad and have champagne. Most people, it is about celebrating a moment. And beauty is definitely something about self-esteem, and it's about taking care of oneself and, feeling good about oneself. And people take care of themselves, not for others, but usually for themselves.
So you've always worked for companies which are ambassadors of the French way of life.
I guess, yeah.
Interesting. Can you tell us in what ways Moët Chandon and the LVMH brands, champagne brands, and then L'Oréal are the perfect ambassadors of the French art de vivre in their marketing, mainly in their products?
Actually, I'll speak about the Champagne House because it wasn't marketing. It was really about what we did with the chef de cave, the one who was actually a little bit like a nose in our fragrance industry. The chef de cave is the one who actually composes the champagne year after year, and then so it is. It's a real art, and then we were lucky enough at Moët to have actual chefs. We had 2 chefs, and so they would work together with a cellar master to compose meals, and so we would then host our guest. So they might have been influencers, they might have been journalists, all kinds of different stakeholders, and have hosting to discover the wines of Champagne, but through food and wine. So that was definitely very French. I did the harvest as well, which was really fun, and picking those grapes in September to make the Champagne. But then in the beauty industry, it's also very linked to a lot of French savoir-faire, like the fragrances. So there's a lot of work we do near Grasse with the fragrance houses and the roses and the jasmine and whatnot, but also with a lot of the different houses we have, like Lancôme or like, so many, like La Roche-Posay, where we take thermal water and we use it. So these are all kind of long-standing traditions that we've been able to continue improving through science, but also enabling people to have access to all of these products.
How would you explain that these brands, whether wines and champagne in the beauty products, have that small difference that makes them so popular worldwide because they're French?
I think, well, first of all, the French and the United States have a very specific relationship. I can't speak for all of the world, but I can talk a little bit about the French and the American. It started even before the United States was created. So it goes back till the 18th century. So France was had a huge influence in, from a philosophical, intellectual, but also political influence with the United States. And since the 18th century, our 2 countries have had incredibly close ties. So I think that there is, in both cases, a huge appreciation of what the other culture, what the other country, what the other history has to offer. And it's true that the French winemaking, champagne making, all of these traditions that have been exported to California, for instance, through Chandon and others, do create those links and make a lot of sense, because we are now creating, whiskey and bourbon in Dordogne. So, it's like, it's in both ways. So I think it's unique. By definition, champagne is only made in a very small region of the world, so they cannot reproduce it. So that also requires the beauty products where we use, for instance, thermal water, like La Roche-Posay, which is sold in the United States, but also in France. The products, it comes from one source, so you can't duplicate that. So there is also that kind of savoir-faire, and the same for fragrances. There are very, very few schools that teach you how to become a nose for perfumes. So there's some in France, some in Switzerland, that's it. So that savoir-faire is, transmitted through those schools. So it's a little bit like the wine or even the food, the cooking school. A lot of them are still based in France, even though they're expanding. But it's something that really, I think, Americans value. And when they come, they really are curious about discovering all of these different.
So, in one word, what do these brands say about France? What values do they bring about France?
I think in terms of values, it's about, well, I guess there's something about generosity with champagne. Moët, for instance, invented the large formats of bottles. Mathusalem, so it's not to splash around, it's to share. So I think there is something about focusing on a moment and celebrating that moment. I think it's about the people behind the brands who contribute to the brands when you listen to them. So when you listen to a nose talk about a fragrance, when you listen to someone who's, developed the jar in which the cream will be put in, all of that savoir-faire is often still very, it's very crafted, it's very artisanal. So there is something that is unique. So it's not something that is necessarily mass-produced. Now, we do have mass-produced products, obviously, but there's always a kind of an approach that comes from, I guess, true creativity and innovation.
Interesting. Would you bring us to travel with you in France? So let's travel a little bit with you, Margaret. It's going to be beautiful weather this weekend. If you had the choice to go anywhere in France, where would you go?
Okay, so it's a tough question. I would take you to two places if I could fly. I mean, fly like a bird, not with a plane. I would take you first to Nice, because that's where really my heart is.
So what's the name of the little village?
So Le Rouret, where we had a
where
house.
your grandmother was.
Exactly, and
living.
then we had the house till quite recently. So I would take you there, and I would take you to the hills of Grasse, and I would take you to the seashore of Nice. And then if I could just take you to the West Coast, I would take you to a place that I've more recently discovered, where we've now created a new family home, which is in Charente-Maritime, which is about 45 minutes outside of Bordeaux in the vineyards. And that is just amazing because in many ways, that has not changed, I think, since the 19th century. There is no constructions compared to the French Riviera. It's very hilly.
In the middle of the vineyards?
In the middle of the cognac vineyards. There's also wheat productions and sunflower fields, but it is completely, I can imagine the way it was, probably throughout the 20th century at least, maybe not 19th. But so there's something quite amazing about that region. So that's the Charente-Maritime, and the whole coast on the Atlantic is gorgeous around Arcachon.
What makes an American dream of France? When an American travels to France, what is he expecting?
I think a lot of them expect to live a cliché, and that's what's been captured in different films and series. But I think one of them is sitting on a terrace of a cafe drinking a glass of wine. And that's something that I think most people, whether it's a glass of wine or a French lemonade, but the idea of sitting on a terrace in Paris would be probably one of the biggest cliches, but in a good way. I mean, that's one of the things that I'm asked when I host Americans who come through.
It's not necessarily a cliche, because one answer could be, if you come to France, we have so many great restaurants. You should go to a Michelin star restaurant.
Yes.
We have the best in France. No, the best of France is a croque monsieur or a simple dish
absolutely right.
at, a cafe at the corner of the street with a cafe. Yeah,
No,
or a
you're
glass of
absolutely
wine.
right. It's about discovering. You're right. The cafe or the bistro or the brasserie that's not necessarily been written up about,
which we have everywhere in Paris, at least, and
You're
in
right.
every city of France. So you grew up surrounded by French gastronomy, thanks to your mom. You explained us. If you had to prepare a typical French menu for an American visiting you for the first time, what would be this meal?
So I'll say right now we're in June, so it's warm. So I would do a salade niçoise. So that is a salad with really good tomatoes, hard-boiled eggs, tuna, fresh onions, a bit of garlic, basil, and really good olive oil and salt and vinegar. So I would do that, and I would probably do a caviar d'aubergine, which is like made from eggplants. It's like an eggplant kind of puree with lemon, olive oil, and garlic. And then I would probably make a tart with plums. So, yeah, kind of the basics, but good. Whatever is in season.
Why is French cuisine so fascinating for people traveling in France and worldwide? People traveling from everywhere in the world, they travel because of the food, and food is really part of the travel.
I think it's actually because there's such a diversity of dishes throughout the country. I mean, it's a relatively small country, France. I mean, it's big, but it's also the size of Texas. So from an American perspective, it's not that massive. And yet, there are so many varieties of cheese, of breads, but also of dishes that are oftentimes made with the same ingredients and turn out entirely differently. So that's one of the appeals. And I think the other one is the fact that it's simple. It doesn't, it's not over elaborate. There are not too many ingredients.
Okay, and any dish you like particularly?
Well, I do. I mean, that's where I'm a little bit biased is I grew up eating a lot of food from the southeast of France, around the French Riviera. So whether it was based with pesto or a lot of vegetables, but also lamb roast, that were very local. So it's true that cooking is definitely part of what I would do at home. But I love to make crepes, and I love to make a good stew, and I love to make a roast chicken. So it's all about finding the right products and produce, I should say. I'm trying to cook more and more vegetarian, but it's tough because I still really like meat.
And if you were to have lunch or dinner at the bistro at the corner of the street in your neighborhood, what would you go for?
I would go for, that's a tough question. I would go for, I love a good French bistro. So I would go to Le Gymnase on Boulevard Raspail, which is kind of like, it's family style. It's small. The menu isn't very big, which is lovely. It has kind of the staples from a steak to a nice blood sausage or a nice piece of fish.
And is there a period of the French history that fascinates you more than others?
More than others? I think it's. I think the 60s is very interesting from a perspective of what was produced in terms of film, in terms of literature. I guess starting from the 50s to the 60s, post-war.
Sorry.
I think there was a lot of amazing work that was done and that was really influential outside of France. So from Truffaut to Godard to Sartre to, I mean, all of these names that are studied in film schools still today or in literature. So I think that was a time in history which was about reconstructing one's identity, asking a lot of questions about where are we going and so on. So yes, I think that's one of the most, I don't know if it's the most fascinating, but it's definitely a period I loved studying.
And that inspires you. Any French song that comes to your mind and that you like?
So I'm a huge fan, was a huge fan when I was a teenager of a band that no longer exists, which was a French band called Téléphone.
Uh-huh.
So there were two songs which I'm thinking of. One was called Un autre monde, and one was called Le jour se lève. And both of those very different. So it was a rock band made up of several guitar players, singers, men and women, and it was a wonderful band. It was a wonderful song.
So if we're coming to the end of this interview, do you have in mind somebody who could be seated in here on your seat for the next podcast?
I'll definitely think about it. Not off the top of my head. obviously my husband is a great choice, but I'm sure there are other people. So let me think about it. But it is true that when I moved to France in the 70s, there were very few Americans living in Paris, or definitely very few bicultural. Today, that's no longer the case. There are many, many people who live in Paris who have lived in the United States or are from the United States. So there's a really great community here. We could definitely choose from.
We know a lot who have, acquired vineyards or French maison for any art in any places of France, and they will be here soon. So merci beaucoup, Margaret, in French. Thank you for being here and for sharing your passion for France.
Thank you so much.